All right, welcome to today's webinar. We are going to be discussing the EU AI Act and some of its real implications. How do you actually go from knowing that a set of regulations exists to managing compliance with the EU AI Act inside a major enterprise corporation? And to do that, we have an amazing guest to join us today. We are joined by Florence Mottay. Florence is the VP of Information Security and Chief Information Security Officer at Zalando, one of Europe's largest e-commerce platforms. She leads the security strategy for an organization operating AI systems at massive scale. Florence, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on today's webinar.
Thank you very much for having me, Jeremy.
It is really our honor and our pleasure. So I want to start with just kind of a general overview. Talk to us a little bit about the AI journey at Zalando. How did you start approaching the opportunity and thinking about use cases that you were going to tackle?
So, at Zalando, tech and innovation aren't just buzzwords. They're really in our DNA. And we've actually been using machine learning and AI for over 15 years
Oh,
to
wow.
tackle some of the biggest hurdles in fashion e-commerce. And so we started with a recommendation engine, sales forecasting. And today it's really evolved into this massive group-wide data engine that powers our entire value chain. And so maybe I can give you a few more examples. If you
Yeah,
take
please.
the B2C side, so the customer, the end customer side, we use AI to make shopping seamless and inspiring. And so if you go on a platform, you'll see personalized home feeds, curated style boards, natural language search, and we even have our Zalando assistant and our virtual fitting room that solves, the age-old problem of sizing. Uh,
Right.
the other side of the coin is our B2B partners. And so there we're using Gen AI to really supercharge retail media, doing things like automating campaign creatives and smart bidding. And AI is also the foundation of ZEOS, which is our operating system for European fashion. And so there, we're actually exposing core logistics and inventory capabilities to autonomous agents. So for us, it's really AI end to end.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And it's such a great point that you bring up because, first of all, machine learning has existed for a very long time, as you mentioned. I think more than 15 years, 15 years that you guys have been using it. But this is a category of technology that's been around for probably more than 2 decades. But the second thing is that, you mentioned some of those use cases. I think these are things that we as consumers of e-commerce services, we expect this level of personalization and customization. And we haven't expected it only for the last 4 years that there's been all this AI buzz. We've been expecting that and we've been used to it for more than a decade. So it's only, I think, this kind of the hype cycle around AI right now that maybe is making consumers sensitive to how data is being processed in AI use cases. But this brings another question in my mind. When I think about a system like Zalando, you have product catalogs, you have logistics, you have customer preferences, their purchase histories. That's a lot of data to think about and manage. And it probably falls into very different categories from a classification perspective. So how have you thought about building a repeatable framework to help your product teams determine if a new feature where they want to use data in an AI context is in an acceptable category or a high risk category, and make that something that people can use quickly as opposed to letting that high risk aspect slow them down or create a bottleneck?
So it's interesting because when the EU AI Act came along, a lot of companies saw it as a massive administrative hurdle. For us, because it nicely coincided with the explosion of Gen AI, we looked at it differently. We really saw it as an opportunity to make compliance a competitive advantage. And
Okay.
so, driven by our corporate governance team, we have put in place a streamlined, risk-based workflow directly into our existing product development tools. And so the way it works is everything starts with our internal AI inventory and experimentation hub.
Okay.
It logs an idea, and then the product manager does a quick guided self-assessment to map it against the EU AI Act's risk levels. And so from there, it's really a traffic light system.
Okay.
Because we're in fashion and lifestyle, the vast majority of our use cases, like standard store recommendations and all, are minimal risk, so we don't fall into the high risk. But in that case, they get an automated, immediate green light to deploy, no waiting.
Okay.
And so we really save the red lights and the time of our human experts in legal, science, HR for the rare high-risk cases. And so by automating that low-risk stuff and setting strict review timelines for the rest, we've really turned compliance into a speed tool.
Interesting. That thinking about this kind of the application of, let's say, HR, legal, some of the teams that would need to review the more sensitive use cases. How have you gotten organizational alignment from them to commit to these kind of rapid, timelines for approval? Because I know that in some organizations, that's kind of a challenge where you say like, okay, this needs to go to legal for review. And that might be a little bit of a black box internally that, okay, it goes to legal. We don't know when we're going to have that. Is it like an SLA system or is it just a shared responsibility, or how have you managed that?
I would say it's a bit of both. So everything goes through a ticketing system. And so it's extremely structured. Everybody responsible for departments. So for me, obviously, it's information security. We get reports on where we are in terms of tickets and SLAs. And so we have that data-driven analysis. But in addition, I think it really feels like a shared responsibility across the company.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful place to be. And I know a lot of organizations would love to feel that they had, shareholders that join in that mission of moving the company forward the way that you have. I've got another question I want to understand about risk, because I think a lot of organizations, ourselves included, we see the innovation in the AI space happening so rapidly. Every week it feels like OpenAI or Anthropic or Google or Microsoft releases a new family of models or a new model version or something with some great capabilities. And so there's a lot of demand to jump around and experiment and so on. But that also brings this kind of black box risk problem where we don't know the risks of the specific models that the providers might be giving us. And so when a vendor updates their model, how are you ensuring that your conformity assessment remains valid? Do you have like a specific AI writer or a clause that you're using on SaaS contracts with third-party vendors? How are you managing this?
So every single third-party software purchase goes through what we call our tech investment committee. And so it's a committee that has legal, privacy, machine learning experts to vet the vendor practices. And so obviously the contract details are confidential, but our baseline is non-negotiable. It's absolute alignment with our data policies and the EU AI Act. And at minimum, every contract requires the vendor to comply with all laws. Additional clauses are then added, right? So a zero data retention would be an example, and so many more.
Sure. That makes a ton of sense. And then when you think about another aspect that's been coming up more and more in some of the conversations that I've been having is, what are the knock-on effects? So you get the third party, you go through some of that. Do you worry about, I've been hearing recently about, fourth party effects or fifth party effects when you have vendors of vendors of vendors. Is that something that you manage more contractually? Because, at some level, you can't have technical visibility into some of those environments.
Yeah, that's very true. And so, as I mentioned earlier, and because of the way our business is set up, we don't actually expect a high volume of high risk AI use cases.
Yeah.
Which means that at least we're not drowning in deep technical documentation. But we still hold our service providers to the highest industry standards as best as we can. So to make sure they stack up, we enforce a strict know your business customer
Okay.
and vendor diligence protocol, as I mentioned during our pre-production phase. We also have, our central AI guardrail. So any commercial model or third party has to clear our legal compliance and, of course, security reviews. When we spot a high-risk system and the vendor can't hand over the granular technical data, metrics, architecture that would be needed to build an EU Annex 4 technical file, it's just a non-starter.
Yeah.
They just simply fail at procurement gates and they're disqualified.
Yeah. It's interesting for me running a smaller organization who is a vendor in the AI security space. I've always told our whole organization that while we follow very, very strict guidelines when it comes to data handling, and for us, we follow SOC 2 protocols, we follow GDPR protocols. We've recently gone through a HIPAA certification process as well to enable some healthcare use cases and customers in the US. And we're also launching a European sovereign region in the coming time period. We've always offered our customers both US and EU hosting for data residency and similar requirements. But I get internal pushback from some of our team who says, hey, look, we are trying to move fast and we're a small organization. We have very little in the way to hold us back other than the requirements that we inherit from relationships with larger organizations. So I similarly position this compliance stuff as a competitive advantage. If we follow these guidelines and we can document all of our use cases, all of our data processors, sub-processors, data residency of all of our environments, that puts us in a position where anybody can consider us, and we may or may not fit with their requirements, but at least we know very quickly, exactly where we stand relative to any of these things. So I appreciate your perspective on that quite a lot. I want to change gears for a second and think now about a little bit about once you start putting use cases forward and maybe getting them towards production.
Mhm.
There's a lot of talk about this kind of tension between automation and then systems that do or don't have levels of autonomy and wanting to put a human in the loop. And again, I know a lot of your use cases in fashion may not be these kind of high risk use cases, but you still don't want customers to have a negative experience, even if it's on something as simple as, hey, can you give me some advice about this product or help me understand if it's going to be a good fit for me or match my style or whatever the case may be. How do you think about human in the loop? There are elements from the customer experience, but there are also elements from the EU AI Act around effective human oversight in certain environments. So how do you manage that overall?
So it's interesting because under the EU AI Act, indeed, human oversight is only required for high risk AI. But because of all the reasons you mentioned, at Zalando, we choose to apply it more broadly on a
Okay.
risk-based approach. And it's no mean feat because keeping a human in the loop at our scale is a massive challenge. To give you some context, last year we fulfilled about 278 million orders.
Yeah.
So in a real-time digital ecosystem, moving at that kind of speed, having a manual human gatekeeper at every single decision point, it would just freeze the business. It's not realistic. So what we had to do is to redefine what meaningful oversight actually looks like. It can't mean a human checking every single AI interaction. But what we do is we use the human hybrid model.
Okay.
And so it combines smart organizational design with automated anomaly thresholds.
Okay.
It's like a security
Yeah.
detection mechanism. And so humans can step in exactly when and where they actually need it.
Oh, that makes a ton of sense. I'd love to learn more if you can share any guidelines for organizations that are thinking about putting in place some of those thresholds. I imagine they took some time and some learning and some tuning to figure out what's the right threshold. This is always one of those things, especially on the cybersecurity side, as you mentioned, where if you tune it too low, you get too many alerts. And if you tune it too high, you miss alerts. How did you find the right balance point?
So for this one, it's not my team, right, who deals with these, thresholds. It's the business team or the engineering business team supporting this process. And
Okay.
it's been a lot of tweaking. And even today, it's more tweaking to make sure that we have the right level of friction, right? That we have
Right.
the friction that is necessary. What I can tell you is I've never worked with such smart teams. Those technical teams are absolutely amazing at Zalando. And so the signals we gather and the knowledge, the intimate knowledge of the business that they have, I think are really the key. So I'm
Yeah.
not sure there are any rules, right? It's more you need people who are at the center of it and you can really approach it with an open mind, but
Yeah.
also a ton of knowledge on the engineering and the business side.
It sounds like another takeaway that I took from what you just said is that, even with an organization that has your level of scale and maturity, this is still a continuous learning process. You don't set this once and it's good forever. It's something that needs to be revisited and reviewed pretty regularly. I don't know how often pretty regularly might mean for every organization, but it does sound like this is an ongoing process as opposed to, once and done.
Yeah, and I think continuous improvement anyway is what we should aim for as an organization. And so that falls just within that overall umbrella.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. Changing gears again for a moment, and I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but this is one of the things about the EUAI Act that I think makes it interesting and challenging for people is that, it covers AI, let's say in big letters, right? It's not AI in this use case, AI in this use case. It's AI writ large everywhere across the organization. So what does that mean? That means everything from, Jeremy working with Gemini or Claude on the desktop to my software development team who is doing AI assisted coding to a customer facing support chatbot, right? It's AI in applications and AI amongst the employees. One of the things that we hear quite frequently is around shadow AI and, kind of the AI nature of shadow IT. When you think about it, I've been hearing about this problem for the last several years. I still think it's a problem for many organizations today. How do you see that risk today?
So I'll take you back a couple of years because at the time, the typical corporate reflex was just to block public
Right.
items and AI assistance out of fear of data leakage. And so at the time, we chose a more balanced route, block only when absolutely necessary, and focus heavily on education.
Okay.
And today, we're still along the same lines of thinking because uh, we realize that the only way to eliminate shadow AI, which is a real problem, is not necessarily by playing a game of whack-a-mole, right? It's
Yeah.
again a problem that we've had in information security for a long time. But I really think it's by giving employees a superior, secured internal alternative. And so if you look at what we do today, every single person at Zalando has enterprise grade access to tools like Google Gemini. And so, of course, it's governed by our corporate agreements and it guarantees our data stays private. But we're also heavily investing in something that I find super exciting. It's our agentic platform to drive efficiency. And so
Okay.
if you think of AI agents, we all know, right? They introduced a new security paradigm. Autonomous agents can access systems, invoke tools, etc. Still, we want to enable our Zalando colleagues to use it.
Yeah.
And so we have this platform that has guardrails built in, and we want to be able to provide access to that platform to our employees so that they can utilize AI and really automate their workflows. And so, if you wonder what kind of guardrails I'm thinking about, we built our own agentic identity broker, which is amazing. I think my team has done a fantastic job there. Um, we have continuous security monitoring. We're looking into local and remote sandboxing. So all of the things that eventually will make it a very clean and easy and secure platform for employees to use. And so it might not fully reduce shadow AI on its own, but again,
Sure.
if you give employees a place to go to do what they need to do, then you build that habit and you drive adoption this way.
Yeah, I think providing that kind of paved path that shows you, this is the way that we as an organization allow you to move forward. And by the way, don't slow you down. If you want to innovate, you want to experiment, just do it within these guardrails on this path and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
I wonder, do you couple that with any, let's say, training around AI literacy, around best practices, around, let's say, organizational IT policies, et cetera? And in particular, I'm curious about one aspect of it, which is that, a lot of employees that I talk to over the years at organizations of all sizes, they hate their annual security training. They find it to be annoying. It's that thing I have to do once a year that takes a couple of hours, and they just click around and put the videos on a second screen while they play and, really ignore it. How do you manage that, and how does that factor into your overall employee experience around allowing AI innovation?
So we still have a yearly security training, which we always try to improve. So hopefully it's viewed less and less as a boring
Yeah,
education
hopefully.
piece. But when it comes to AI literacy, we really have a program, right? I mean, from a long time, well, it's been a while already that we've realized that AI literacy cannot be treated like a static exercise. And so we have three distinct levels that we use. The first is the leader fluency. So
Okay.
for all of the business leaders, business and engineering leaders, as well as process owners. And it's really to look at an operational challenge and try to translate it into a high impact AI use case. The
Okay.
second is general productivity. And so here, think citizen AI developers. So empowering our workforce to safely use tools like Google Gemini or our agentic platform, by the way, uh,
Okay.
and to automate administrative tasks so that they can improve their efficiency and their productivity. And the third part is really the specialized technical guardrails. So, I mean, our training program overall, our tech academy, um, constantly provides training courses to upskill our engineers in areas like prompt engineering, MCP design, design. And so it's not only about security, although it's a lot about security.
Yeah.
We really try to provide the functional aspect and bake security in it for all of these training tracks.
I want to ask a follow-up question on that because that's a very mature kind of understanding of the different levels of users of AI within an organization. And at a time when a lot of organizations are struggling to get V1 of any level of, let's say, AI usage policy out the door, I want to ask, what was the journey to get there? Did you sit down first and define the roles, or is this the result of we had a policy a couple of years ago, then we realized it needed to kind of separate into different roles? How did you arrive where you are today?
That's an interesting question. I think that when we started with the Zalando assistant at the end of 2022 and then into 2023, we realized that with a company that's as bold and innovative as Zalando, we need to enable, right? And so it wasn't a big piece of news, but it certainly reinforced that fact. And so as time passed, what we saw is everybody was interested in AI. And so again, we had a choice: either try to control it and reduce the usage, or come up with a way to really support that growth. We chose the latter.
Yep.
And that's when one of the teams started working on that agentic platform. And little by little, because we're always embedded in all of these steps, we jointly really came up with the three different levels that I mentioned.
Okay. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. While we're on the topic of kind of organizational change, or let's say preparing your organization for the quote unquote age of AI or the AI era or whatever you want to call it, how does that manifest in your relationship as the chief information security officer with the board? Because I know in a lot of leader conversations that I've had with security leaders like yourself, I've heard oh, this is the biggest risk of my whole career, both from the standpoint of, we have a non-deterministic piece of technology. I can't tell you what's going to happen. I can't quantify the risk around this. And I've also talked to a now former chief information security officer of a regional bank who tried to go the other route where he said, look, we're a bank, the risk is too high, we're going to shut it down. And that person is now looking for another position. There's a lot of moving parts in the kind of board, CISO IT, CISO product team, all of these relationships around AI and the evolving risk around it. The regulatory fines around the EU AI Act in particular can be quite harsh. I don't know if I can't remember if it's the same percentage as GDPR or maybe even higher. How are you managing this from your position?
So obviously, we're not in a heavily regulated industry. Parts of our business are, and so they're treated slightly differently. But overall, and just in the 25 years that I've been in security, for me, being an enabler is the only way to be successful because we're here to support a business. Even when I was in consultancy, that's still your role, right? You can't be a showstopper, or as I always say, a department of no. And
Right.
so even from the start, when we started with the Zalando assistant idea in late 2022, the business leader who had that thought wanted to be one of the first on the market, but also wanted it to be a success. And so when she called me and started telling me about the idea, I said, okay, let's do it, but let's do it together the right way. And so by being involved from the start and by trying to find to move the dial, right? It's not an exact science to minimize the risk to an acceptable level. Well, the board sees you as an enabler as a result because you understand you're here to help. You're not here to be a showstopper. And at the same time, the business leaders around the company feel empowered. So and maybe it goes a bit further than that because that's more the high level relationship. But when you look at how we've really embedded data compliance and risk self assessments in our AI workflow, as I mentioned earlier, we give our developers, our engineers, the ultimate green light to experiment, which is also great.
Yeah.
Because from a governance standpoint, that means that we can potentially launch a new feature in days rather than months. And it also means that we have that space for everybody to try new ideas, to be innovative. So I think by doing this, we show the board and business leaders across the company as well that risk management is actually protecting our capital and enabling that growth and not impeding it.
But first of all, that's an amazing answer, but there's something in there that I want to dig into if I can. And this is a little bit outside the EU AI Act because you said something that I still think a lot of boards struggle with. And in fact, a lot of security leaders struggle with as well. You said being there from the beginning and partnering and doing it the right way. That's like the perfect scenario.
It
That's the
is.
scenario that every security leader would love to have. I'm brought into a conversation at the beginning of a new technology adoption or a new initiative or whatever it is. And I'm a partner at the table where I understand what's being proposed. I can help you understand the risks to the organization. We can make informed decisions. I always tell people security is always a trade off, right? There's never a 100% secure. There's never a 0% secure, right? Or at least shouldn't ever be a 0% secure, right? But that implies that you had a very strong relationship already. What are some advice or tips that you can give to other people stepping into security leadership positions? First of all, in general, but second of all, right now, with all the change going on and all the innovation happening, so that you can build that relationship with the board so that you will be trusted and brought in at that early stage.
It's interesting because and you just said it in your last sentence, but I think the secret is trust. So you have to
Okay.
be trust with your peers who are in the business, who are leaders of engineering, and then you build a relationship with the board as well. I don't think there's a recipe. I think it's
Okay.
enabling. I mean, you come in, you enable a first business leader, you unblock something, you understand what they're trying to do, and you're really there to help them get there. Well, that's step one. And then as you continue throughout the organization, that's how you build trust. I, I think it's just a step-by-step process, but certainly everywhere I've done work as a consultant or as a CISO in my previous role and this one, I think this is the secret.
This is the secret. Now, when it comes specifically to AI, maybe there are some things that are a little bit more granular and concrete. If you were going to suggest KPIs for AI risk to somebody today, whether it's to the CEO or to the board or to people within the security organization that you lead, what would be ones that are actually meaningful?
So I can't say that we're fully that we have done that fully, but if you step back, what does our CEO or a CEO care about? Actual risk exposure and probably financial impact, right?
Right.
And so if I had to think of three KPIs, I would probably think of the governance and compliance coverage. So
Okay.
that's the safety baseline, right? The percentage of active AI models that have passed all internal security, privacy checks, etc. By the way, a nice side effect is that it will help eliminate shadow AI too, if you
Yeah.
try it.
Yep.
The second is unmitigated high-risk systems. Again, not as relevant for us, but still, even if it's very, very few, I would I would think that a CEO would be interested in that. And the third is the cost of control. And so that's not specific to AI really, but it's always something that that is
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, like I said, it's always a trade-off, right? If you say I have infinite cost that I can use for controls, great, I'm going to use infinite costs. I still can't give you a 100% security guarantee because you never know about 0 days. But if I do spend infinite costs, I'm also probably slowing down the whole organization with things that I'm doing. So finding that right balance and figuring out what that right kind of risk sizing is, I think is super interesting to keep in mind.
Absolutely.
Now, you've talked several times about being an enabler, and I think that is 100% the right approach towards security leadership. I have a long talked, even from my days as a practitioner, about trying to tear down the wall and the perception of exactly as you said, the Department of No. I know early in my career in some of the organizations that I worked in, we were the Department of No, and we liked to say no. And we even had a little bit of pride in being intimidating towards the users and being able to tell them, we know better than you. We're going to tell you yes or no. But I think that that has to, I think that needed to change 10 years ago. And if it didn't change 10 years ago, it really has to change now. I'll again cite that example of the former chief information security officer of the regional bank that I spoke with recently. But there are other things around enablement that I think are very interesting to think about. Thinking about corporate ethics, thinking about algorithmic fairness, which is again one of the use cases that does come into play in the EU AI Act and may or may not be relevant to Zalando. But how should we think about our own identity as leaders in the security space as we move forward? Is it all about continuing to maintain trust and enablement? Is there more that we need to think about in our own approach to the job?
So to your first point, I'm with you. I think that we've always being an enabler has always been the secret. And more than ever, we need to think of ourselves and really be business executives who happen to specialize in security. I
Yeah.
think it's extremely important. Now, to the more detailed question, maybe I can give you an example of what we did for, again, our Zalando assistance,
Yeah.
which is already a few years old now. But when we had that request to partner with the business, we really looked at it holistically. So legal, applied science, product teams, we co-built a governance framework. And with that, we actually built, we had, I think, 80,000 or odd prompts that we classified to build an actual classifier for the Zalando assistant. And so it's a classifier that we still use today. And so, of course, in 2026, it doesn't sound as exceptional, but in 2023, it was, because it was actually new. And so for us, it's just, I think it's an example of how we continuously try to abide by all the laws, but also by what we believe is an ethical way of acting as a company.
Mm. And from a leadership perspective, as you think about moving forward and continuing to enable the organization, what do you think are some of the requirements around maintaining employee awareness, going after the right talent? What are some of the mindsets that you look for in people that are joining your organization to provide that next layer of leadership under you that keeps the organization moving forward and innovative?
I think we all need to train, we all need to learn. As security practitioners, it's not new. We've been, again, I just look at my own experience, 25 years of changes, of the role evolving and the world around us evolving vastly. And so we need to continue that. We need to continue to learn. So from my team, that's what we do. That's why we try to push to every member. And for new hires, I would say the same. But learning and actually getting experience with these technologies is more important than ever.
Yeah, I couldn't say any more myself. I mean, I know that since we started tackling this problem and helping our customers solve the problem of whether it's the eliminate shadow AI aspect or let's say building the audit trail for EU AI Act compliance that we help our customers with, getting our own employees bought into that vision of we need to understand it and use it and learn it has also been a huge benefit to the organization, both in terms of innovation, but in particular in how we can then communicate to our external stakeholders all the challenges that they're going to face and getting solutions to that.
I fully agree with that last part, sorry.
No,
And
no, please.
actually something that I find quite exciting. So I came from a technical background, but of course, from our generation, dare I say,
Yeah.
we have a lot of people who came more from the compliance side, which again is great, right? A big,
Yeah.
very different perspectives. But what we see is when we deal with engineering teams or very technical business teams, it's hard sometimes because folks who don't have a technical background have a hard time speaking the same language. Here, it's new for everyone. So we have a chance of right away being on the same wavelength and being able to communicate in words that resonate on both ends. So I think also for the younger generation, it's a super opportunity.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And it's also, that that positioning that, hey, we're in this together. We're all going through this new technology, learning it. I think that's also a great trust building exercise. Going back to a point you raised earlier, when you do have that trust with your users, I think they're going to listen to you more, follow your policies more. Like everything about the whole security and business relationship should go better, right?
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. I've got one or two last questions that I'd love to sneak in here. Hopefully, we don't run out of time. But you're a security leader who's gone through GDPR implementation and helping organizations navigate that. How do you see the EU AI Act? Is this GDPR kind of V2 or GDPR for AI? Do you think this is a thing that's going to help the EU or European companies hold them back? I have one opinion that I'll share after I hear your thoughts, but I'd love to hear your thoughts first.
I think we have a responsibility as companies to do the right thing. And so I think that having a common foundation is really important. And maybe I can throw something in, right? That slightly diverges, but which shows the way we think about it at Zalando. We recently joined what's called the Hiroshima AI Process Reporting Framework.
Okay.
And so it's an international AI governance framework endorsed by all G7 member states. And it's really designed to help organizations capture the benefits of advanced AI while managing the risks. And so for us as a company, this risk-based framework is an important way to demonstrate our commitment to responsible AI governance and accountability. And so there's real value in having that international alignment that doesn't necessarily create any complexity or red tape. And so if you take that and then go back to your original question,
Yeah.
I'm often asked if the EU AI Act is perfect and if it's great. It's like everything else. Maybe there could be improvements, but at least it provides a foundation.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's very important.
Yeah, I agree on that foundation in particular. And as somebody, I myself am, those who know me may know I spend about half my time in Europe, half my time in the US, and dual citizen, EU citizen, as well as being an American citizen. One of the things that's come out is, of course, I love to see when companies do the right thing. But as somebody who's been hopping across on both sides, I've had a really interesting observation with some of the conversations over the last, let's say, 6 to 9 months. And that is the EU AI Act, whether it's perfect or not, it does provide a framework and a foundation, and it gives me a set of directions for how I should move forward, right? If I'm a security leader in an organization that's implementing AI right now, or at least it tells me a list of things that I have to block. So, okay, I know I need an inventory. I know I need 6 months of prompt logs for compliance purposes, and I know I have to avoid these 8 prohibited use cases. And there's a little bit more nuance, but let's say like those are your top 3 bullet points. That's a very clear set of instructions.
It is.
And outside of that set of instructions, when you look across AI right now, there's nothing. There's very little else. You know, peop contacts that I talk to in the US, they ask me, "Hey, where can I find a good framework to start my organization on an AI security journey?" You say, "Well, there's the NIST AI risk management framework, but that's a risk management framework. It doesn't have any technical controls really. It's a set of guidelines that don't really tell you what you can or cannot do. It's just a set of questions that you ask yourself, and there's no audit around it. There's no compliance around it. So an auditor would come in if you hired one. You said, "Hey, audit me for the NIST AI RMF," and they'd probably look at it and say, "Well, there's nothing to audit here. At best, I can interview you and say, how do you feel about your risk management?"
Yeah.
And it's the kind of question that's how long is a piece of string? The answer is always it depends. So I'm very curious as to, let's say, the next 12 to 18 months, how this is going to play out, whether this actually gives a lot of European organizations a little bit of an advantage because they have a clear compass that's pointing them down a path of like, this is how you navigate AI adoption. As long as you follow these rules, you're staying on the right side of things and you're doing the right thing for the customer and for the organization, et cetera. Whereas in the US, we've seen an executive order that was then canceled. We've seen a state like Colorado that put in place a set of rules and then rolled them back 4 months later. What could happen at any time actually, in my mind, provides a ton of uncertainty to security leaders over there who are trying to navigate this for their own organization. So a little bit to your point, is it perfect? Who knows? Maybe, maybe not. But it's a clear set of instructions. And I'm really, like I said, really curious to see how this plays out.
I agree. It's definitely interesting times, especially when you hear sometimes that this is that the EU AI Act actually slows down innovation, and that we may fall behind compared to a country
Right.
like the US. So it's very interesting. Again, for me, it's interesting. It's very important to have that foundation, and so yes, let's see how it goes.
Let's see. Florence, this has been amazing. If I could just slip in one last closing question for you. There's so much going on here, and we've talked about as much of it as we could fit into today. But if you could give one piece of advice to a CISO who currently feels like they're losing the race inside their own organization, whether that's against, kind of enabling AI adoption or against AI regulation, what advice would you give them? Is it a mindset shift? Is it a set of technical controls? Where would you have them start?
So maybe one piece of advice, and it's not new, but for me, again, it's more crucial than it's ever been. It would be this: don't be a bottleneck. Get in the trenches with your teams and turn security into an accelerator that actually helps the business move faster.
Yeah. I think that is very well said, and that is a great place to end today's webinar. Florence Mottay, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on this webinar. And for any follow-up questions, please send them to us at FireTail. We'll see if we can funnel any of them over to you. And if not, we'll try to post some of our own thoughts on our blog or elsewhere. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jeremy.